One of the few bands to emerge since to be able to match up to a Cult of Luna and scratch the face of a god sometimes are Rolo Tomassi, who have also just released their new record called Where Myth Becomes Memory. This is the 6th album from Rolo Tomassi, and arguably the 3rd in a series of records which has seen them become, without hyperbole, one of the best bands around today. Sam, there is a scene of progressive and boundary-pushing post-hardcore and metal bands that we often look at as being some of the most exciting bands in this country, for whom Rolo Tomassi, having been around a decade or so longer than a lot of them, have laid some pretty notable groundwork for. But with this still being a pretty, young group of musicians, on the form they've been on, they have, in recent years, become basically the elite of that scene here, right?
Yeah, they really have, like the early Rolo Tomassi stuff, you can tell that is played by a bunch of kids, essentially, who just have all these ideas and they're just throwing them out. And then the growth since Grievances and what they've kind of become has just leads and become the most sort of like leading and inspiring, from the UK, that is like inspiring the likes of Palm Reader and all of those kind of bands. So even like Svalbards and likes of that, Rolo Tomassi seem to be the band who've kind of laid the groundwork for them when Grievances came out. Was it 2015?
Yeah, that was that record. I really admire Rolo Tomassi for basically continuing to put in the graft. They weren't a band who had a particular industry spotlight on them or anything, and instead have kind of evolved from extremely niche, hyperactive electronic core foundations to unfurling this level of grace and breathtaking craft that on Time Will Die and Love Will Bury It in 2018 became just too undeniable for people to ignore anymore, and they attained a level of pedigree deserving of a band to have reached a level of quality like them. Sam, you clearly hold this band to be elite in their scene the way I do. Alec, the worlds of mathcore and post-hardcore and stuff, what they are today, I imagine you must like them in the same way.
Yeah, I always wanted to like this band. I remember an article in Kerrang, I think it was around hysterics or cosmology, and Eva, she kind of burst my little metalhead bubble, because all me and my mates, my straight white male mates had gotten into metal, and she was interviewed and she was talking about all the kind of just the shit she faced just for being a woman singing in a rock band. And there was this, it always sticks with me. There was a guy who was screaming "no clit in the pit" at her, and I was so fucking shocked at that. And from that moment on, I wanted to love Rolo Tomassi, and I listened to Hysterics, and I just turned into the meme of Jose Mourinho just ripping off his headset. I couldn't I couldn't stand it.
I like old Rolo Tomassi for
I love old Rolo Tomassi.
I like it now, but back then I just could not get on board. But I always listened every time they brought out a new thing. And Grievances, that was the one. It's darker, moodier, more cohesive. Don't want to say the word mature, but since then I've been so on board with this band. They are fucking excellent.
I think mature was a fair word for it, though, because I think with
Rolo it is one of the cases where you can say that very much.
I love those early records. I wasn't into much Matthew stuff at the moment, but there was just something about Rolo Tomassi. I don't know if it was because they were a UK band and it kind of felt like I was sort of discovering something that was cool and underground at the time when I was listening to them in 2010. But I really like it, and I don't know, all the Nintendo noises again and all the weird shifts and turns. It's not it's very messy and all over the place, but there was something kind of just endearing about it to me. But when they kind of decided, okay, now we're going to start writing songs on Grievances, and then taking that step further on Time Will Die, I mean, they've just become so special.
Well, this record has some quite serious things to live up to in terms of how much people connected with Time Will Die and the run of records it falls into. And to make a comparison with Venom Prison, which we reviewed first, 3rd album from that band, massive mix-up of the creative pot. Erebos is a band striving for greatness. Rolo Tomassi are a band who hit that arguably 2 albums ago. And so where they've made their big leaps, we're now getting sort of smaller etchings now on how they approach what they do. I think that wins it less headlines and less turning of heads than a leap like Erebos does. But that mastery that Venom Prison are kind of eking out, Rolo have been there. And reviewing this immediately after Cult of Luna is fucking hell. We are just continuing all of the same fawning and discussion of that level of kind of this is an album that has so much work has been done in all areas of all sounds are in the mix. It's unbelievably impressive to deconstruct.
This is an album I will genuinely describe as beautiful at so many moments. The melody on this album is stunning. Almost always as an opener, it just shimmers and just glistens with so much like grace and elegance. Those like really delicate pianos they use, the kind of like post rock sort of post metal guitar lines. Eva's vocals just have the right amount of like delicacy to them, but like still loads of personality. Like when they do that, it's so incredible. And then when they follow up and they go heavy, it is so obnoxious, so in your face, so intense. And they nail that balance between the beauty and the beast of it, essentially.
Yeah, Eva, just her voice is angelic. Like when she does those, she makes me feel like you know when Anneke van Giersbergen will do like a really sweet vocal. It is that kind of thing. It just makes me feel so warm inside. But then, as you're saying, just those savage. It's a proper like that flip of the coin is like no one else, pretty much. Like she's so unique.
I think this record almost has more of a kind of contrast and divide than their previous couple between the most pretty moments and the really aggressive stuff. Cloaked was the single for this record that is fucking phenomenal in terms of like guillotine blade falling on your head, heavy riff. It's catchy, it's more memorable than you might expect, and it gets into that groove. I love this electronic droning effect it kind of has against the riff. That's it sounds like the soundtrack to like Under the Skin or a film like that, and it kind of makes it sound so incredible and alien, and it elevates that riff even further. You want to look at the dynamics of like how to craft, you know, what for them was the single. Heavy, immediate, riffy song that has clean vocal breaks and mood shifts and everything without sounding formulaic. Like, this is a wonderful, wonderful example. And that goes for how they put together the record. Because in sequencing, that transition to Mutual Ruin with cloaked riffs just giving away to this like one lone piano key, it's genuinely scary. Like, it has this whole feeling of momentum shifts that just turn on a dime and introduce panic and like something threatening coming around the corner.
Yeah, no, totally. The best example for that is Closer into Drip, where like Drip begins with just 40 seconds of him just beating the ever-loving crap out of his drum kit after Closer, which is a song that genuinely makes me emotional. That those transitions between just like heart-wrenching beauty and just like sheer terrifying ferocity, they do it so much. Going back to Cloaked for a second, like that riff, like in lesser hands, that'd be just another sort of generic gent riff, but Rolo play it with so much just like bounce and ferocity, and again it hits so much harder as a result.
The way that riff is like supported by the keys, I think 99 of the other 100 bands would have done it like Architects, but Rolo Tomassi, the way that they pair it with the keys, it's like Strapping Young Lad or something. Like the way that those keys sit there is just something that is like it's there, you know, it's there, but there's just something really wrong about it, and I love it.
Yeah, I love just that feeling of like just strangeness you get from it, and I swear this record has more out and out metal than Time Will Die did. Like that record is obviously devastating when it needs to be, but I always associate those those huge kind of post metal like tracks of release, and this doesn't feel quite as mathy as it once was. Instead, Drip, the whole thing is built on this like, you know, Gojira like sort of polyrhythmic effect where that looping drum pattern is pure Duplantier, and the tightness of that picking is so destructive. The central riff in Prescience is like Meshuggah warring with a band like Silosis or something, and there's a really inventive push for like metal riffing styles on this record that they're primarily very effective, but a lot of work has clearly gone to land on the tones alone and like the sounds guitars are making. When Mutual Ruin speeds up into that punk tempo, the riffing goes like liquid, like Matt Bellamy or something, with the tone distortion and pushing of thickness and everything getting heavier and more brutish and more weird. It really feels like it's there's a kind of increased, I don't want to say meatheadedness because that's completely not the right word at all, but like the metal aggression is there.
Actually, because Labyrinthine, when that riff drops after that sort of bass line, it's
hilarious.
Like, fist swinging, like
so
hardcore
heavy
riff. Like there's even like President almost has like kind of like buzzsaw kind of like tone to the riffing at times. Like there is so much more just like out and out metal on this record, when they want to be, and it's so cool that they have the confidence we are just going to do a crushing metal riff at this point, and at the flick of a switch they could go into something that is, as I've said several times, just genuinely beautiful, and it's so well crafted.
That labyrinthine riff is the nastiest riff of the year so far, and it's on a record that does feature many of the prettiest moments of the year so far as well, as you say. But I love that it feels queasy the way that, you know, Meshuggah can do without actually sounding too much like Meshuggah. It's just that feeling of, like, you know, seasickness, kind of boat rocking. But I also feel like that upfront fucking metal riffing sounds so huge on this, where imagine someone who likes Ginger and those kind of bands getting that in front of them. Like, it's an undeniable sell. Like, this has an intensity and a hunger still in the immediacy of those moments.
Closer to Drip, that 1-2 kind of sums up. I don't want to say it sums up the record. That sounds quite reductive, but you know what I mean. That kind of whiplash that you get from those two tracks is. I think it's the best part of the record because it just sums up everything that I love about it. You get that fucking gorgeous Closer, and then Drip. What you're talking about with the drums, I was laughing at the snare on
hammering
Drip.
it.
Like, it is so like pig-headed, but it's not basic. When it's adding those polyrhythms in, like you're saying, it just builds and builds and builds and builds. And then at the end, like, even like those layered like vocals, she sounds like she's wheezing, like she's running out of breath with one of the vocal tracks. It's so, it's just uncomfortable, but in the best possible way.
And when Drip actually kind of explodes, it's so disorienting when the actual like song really takes off, and you just get this blast of noise. And then eventually they do lock into that, like, into a riff, and you kind of get that sort of steadiness again for a few seconds. But the turns it makes across the soundmark can just like knock you out like so easily when you're not paying attention. Like,
yeah, well, there's that like jackhammer relentlessness in the snare, like you're saying, on Drip, and Closer immediately before it. The dexterousness in the kind of, there's a real light-footedness to the rhythm section there. It's like ballet or something, and you put Eva on a space like that, like, you fucking game over. You can't compete with that. Like, it's just outrageously fucking pretty. And her voice, like, you know, like you said, she's so markedly controlled and rings up with such clarity, has a really pronounced English accent as well, which is kind of distinctive. Like, I would maybe be curious to hear what any of our like American, Australia, or wherever listeners make of her when she sings like, "Are you waiting for a sign?" Like, it's almost always, it's well English, but unbelievably agile vocally and talented.
Yeah, like, I don't care if it makes me sound like a right old flag shagger. Like, I love British bands singing in actual
when they
British
sound
accents.
British,
like,
yeah.
I love it because not enough of them do it, and it just sounds good.
Yeah, and almost always as well. Not to be confused with Almost Again, the Strapping Young Lad song that was brilliantly pulled out of Bloodstock last year. But for what is like 4 minutes of build at the start of your record, you rarely get something that is just such instant a hit of like bliss like that just buzzing suspension in the sky of the guitar effects and Eva's voice at the center. Rolo Tomassi increasingly have this ability of just like put their hand on your shoulder and go, everything's going to be okay with their sound, like, while still packing so much heaviness. Like, it's really impressive, but that just like outright overwhelming sun-kissed euphoria is really something. I do really love the way they've used pianos on their last few records as well. Like, obviously in the early days we were talking more about those kind of like synth sounds and stuff like that, with that kind of more wacky sense. Now they have this kind of classical grace to them when it lifts and starts ascending in the back end of that song, or the finale of Mutual Ruin with just Eva and the piano. It's just beautiful. The piano track Stumbling, it reminds me of the piano interlude that's on the last Tribulation album, which I similarly loved just because it sounds so classy and like archaic in a good way, like transportative to some grand Victorian hall or something. And then at the same time, without it actually sounding like in any way it should be part of a different record or something, you have those really cutting edge modern electronics seamlessly integrated alongside them as well.
Yeah, this is like, I feel like we said it like with a lot of the records today, in just how much stuff is thrown into the pot.
It's a big month for expansive records.
Yeah,
It is, yeah.
but this falls more in line with Cult of Luna than Zeal and Ardor, in that it's such a well realized sound. Like, I think all these last three Rolo albums have all been exceptional, and I think this might be the best one just because they've been doing it for longer, so they've gotten better at it.
I need to live with this a bit longer because Time Will Die has like a real special place in my heart at this point. But I do think this album is just a band who have just such a like master of their craft, and they have such assurance that they can be obnoxiously heavy when they want to. They can be really delicate. They know when is the right time to pull out each sort of trick, and they don't overuse anything. They don't. Nothing ever feels reductive or repetitive. It's so like everything has its moment in place and sounds so vast and just so transportative. And I think that just comes from 10 plus years of doing this now.
Yeah, I think the peak moment of like that transcendent hit of the dam breaking, I think both here and for Cotaluna actually, there's not quite the high, like that one moment, like a flood of light or All That Has Gone Before from Grievances, that's gonna like reduce me to my knees every time I hear it. But Rolo are a band who are like, they're on their classic run right now, and the electronics again, those have become so, I guess, encouraged of like how to be a kind of cutting edge metal band today, and there's a delicate touch to how they're used here that I think is worth studying for newer bands, and that goes for almost everything that they kind of try their hand at on a record like this. If you're in the UK, they're on tour with Pupil Slicer and Harriet in the coming weeks after this episode goes out. That is a hell of a bill for bands of the moment, so go and check it out. Come say hi if you're at the Manchester show. Yeah,